Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In today's video, we're going to be discussing the Harry Potter books, the Harry Potter films, and none other than Severus Snape. More specifically, we're going to be taking a look at Snape's character and uncovering a few little-known facts about Snape that only book readers will know. That's right, the films left things out. If you haven't read the books, then your next moves should be A. Continue watching this video, then B. Buy the complete Harry Potter book set and get to reading. Now, the first thing worth mentioning is that Snape is quite different from book to film, not just in his actions, but in his demeanour. His character, while very similar in some ways, has a bit of a different undertone. Alan Rickman's portrayal was excellent. In fact, to me, it was one of the best acting performances in any role ever. But that certainly doesn't mean that the films didn't take certain liberties where they could. Book Snape was arrogant, apathetic, and seemingly without any kind of moral compass. He showed blatant favouritism towards students of his house, Slytherin, bullied students until they couldn't cope anymore, and showed very little indication of valuing other human lives. He was a vindictive and cruel man that would often let his emotions get the better of him in the form of anger-fueled outbursts. Movie Snape was a little frightening at times, and quite strict, feared, but overall was not nearly as bad as the Snape from the books. Movie Snape also bullied students, a little, but it was all just toned down to a much more reasonable level. Furthermore, he was much more in control of his emotions. He was controlled, brooding and calculating, rather than outwardly emotional and vengeful. With all of this said, there are a few things that we need to bear in mind. First of all, Snape is in the films far less than he is in the books. The films are much more condensed, and for this reason, the highlight reel of Snape that we get may not be indicative of his true nature. Furthermore, the books are written much more from the perspective of Harry, who is naturally heavily biased towards Snape. For this reason, looking at Snape through the lens of Harry may have inflated how bad he actually was. Perhaps the film Snape actually gave a better, unbiased impression of what Snape was really like. One thing is for certain, however, moviegoers are certainly more forgiving of Snape than book readers, and that's because they weren't exposed to the darker Snape that others had become accustomed to. When Snape's true motivations were revealed in the last film, the film version had somehow vindicated himself, whereas book Snape was possibly not worthy of this same vindication. With all of this in mind, I want to look at 5 things that moviegoers won't know about the Snape from the books. 5 actions that he took or things that he was a part of that were entirely left out of the films. Let's dive into it. Number 1. James Potter saved his life. Now, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that Snape and Harry's father James didn't get along. In fact, they were the biggest of enemies, rivals who were both in pursuit of Lily Evans' heart. In school, James was awful to Snape, as were the other Marauders. Snape was bullied for being different, and being so different meant that he was a constant target for the Marauders' antics. The movies touch on Snape's relationship with James, but one thing that they neglected to include was the fact that James once saved Snape's life. One day, while bullying Snape, the antics of the Marauders got out of hand, putting Snape's life in danger. When James recognized that the prank had gotten outrageously out of hand, he ended up saving Snape's life. However, it's also worth noting that Snape didn't see James's actions as heroism. He saw it as James simply looking out for himself so that he wouldn't be punished, which is probably the case. Number 2. Snape told Voldemort about the prophecy. The prophecy in question is of course the one foretold by Sybil Trelawney in Hogsmeade Pub in the year 1980. We know Sybil as the professor of divination at Hogwarts, and we know that she has a track record of successful predictions, predicting at the end of the 93-94 school year that Pettigrew would escape and that Voldemort would return. However, she was not always so successful, and in 1980 found herself in the Hogsmeade Pub with Dumbledore, interviewing for her post as professor. While her track record was not good at this time, Dumbledore gave her a chance because she was the great-granddaughter of famous seer Cassandra Trelawney. During her interview, a disappointed and unimpressed Dumbledore began to lose interest, when suddenly Sybil entered a trance. In her trance, Sybil spoke of the famous prophecy that we all know, explaining that Voldemort would be defeated. It spoke of a boy that would be born at the end of July, that possessed the power to defeat the Dark Lord himself. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore mentions to Harry that a spy overheard Sybil Trelawney's prediction and relayed all of the information to Voldemort. What we later learn is that this spy was in fact Severus Snape. A loyal Death Eater at the time, Snape was hoping to build brownie points with Voldemort, but his biggest error here was that he failed to make the connection between the prophecy and Lily Evans' life. Number 3. Snape is responsible for Lupin losing his job. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Hogwarts is once again graced with a new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, but this time it's someone with quite a few close personal connections to Harry, Remus Lupin. Remus was born a wizard, but later in life became a werewolf after being attacked by notorious werewolf Fenrir Greyback. Given that there was a considerable amount of stigma towards werewolves in the wizarding world, Remus and his friends always tried their best to keep his werewolf status a secret. At the end of the school year in the Prisoner of Azkaban film, Remus is seen packing up his desk. He explains to Harry that word had gotten out regarding his werewolf status, and that Hogwarts had become inundated with angry messages from parents who were not happy with the situation. This is why Remus lost his job. In the book, however, it's actually Snape who was responsible for Remus losing his position. Snape despised Remus and wanted him to leave Hogwarts, which prompted him to tell his students about Remus's secret. Number 4. Snape protected Harry from Umbridge. In the Order of the Phoenix, Dolores Umbridge had essentially taken over Hogwarts. She started as the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor and quickly advanced to become Hogwarts High Inquisitor, then Headmaster. While presiding over the school, she abused her power and put all sorts of rules in place that oppressed students. Umbridge, very much aware of Harry's antics, would continually challenge and question him, hoping that he would divulge information about Dumbledore, who was now at large, as well as Sirius. In order to extract this information from Harry, Umbridge gets a truth potion from Snape in the hopes that Harry would divulge every piece of information he knew about the Order of the Phoenix. However, what filmgoers won't know about this part of the story is that Snape actually gave Umbridge a fake truth potion. This is later reinforced by Dumbledore when addressing Harry. It was he too who gave Professor Umbridge fake vindictive when she was attempting to force you to tell of Sirius's whereabouts. Number 5. Snape passed on the message that Sirius Black had been captured in Order of the Phoenix. Piggybacking off this last point, when Harry is captured by Umbridge, he tries to tell Snape that Voldemort is holding Sirius captive at the Department of Mysteries. To this remark, Snape plays dumb, essentially ignoring what Harry has just told him. In the film, we never really get any clarification as to whether or not Snape passed the message on, but in the book, Dumbledore later clarifies that Snape did in fact relay the message, which is why the Order of the Phoenix showed up to save Harry and his friends. And that's it for this video. Did you know all of these little factoids about Snape? Which Snape did you prefer? Let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, always